The beginning of something beautiful. The city pulsed with a life of its own. New York at night was a playground for the ambitious, a dreamscape for those who refused to settle for less. Under the golden glow of streetlights, Olivia Carter adjusted her dress, her reflection shimmering in the tinted window of the Blacktown car that pulled up outside an exclusive restaurant in the Upper East Side. She wasn't nervous. She didn't get nervous. She had spent years molding herself into the kind of woman who belonged in places like these. Places where wealth whispered in hushed tones over crystal glasses, where power was exchanged in smiles rather than contracts. Tonight, she wasn't just another girl from the middle class, scraping by on ambition alone. Tonight, she was Olivia Carter, stunning, poised, and sitting across from Nathaniel Harrington. And Nathaniel wasn't just any man, he was the man. The heir to the Harrington fortune. A real estate empire worth billions. A man who had never needed to introduce himself, because everyone already knew his name. And more importantly, he had chosen her. First, impressions that last forever. Nathaniel arrived 20 minutes late, not out of disrespect, but out of a confidence that only came with knowing the world would wait for him. When he finally walked in, the atmosphere shifted. A few heads turned, subtle, admiring glances, the kind that weren't just about his looks, though those certainly helped. Sharp blue eyes, dark brown hair effortlessly styled, a tailored suit that probably cost more than Olivia's entire rent for the year. He carried himself like a man who had never heard the word no. And Olivia? She was about to make sure he never wanted to. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Nate said smoothly as he slid into the seat across from her. Olivia met his gaze, her lips curving into a soft, deliberate smile. "I don't mind waiting for something worth the time." A flicker of interest flashed across his face. He leaned back, observing her, a slow smirk tugging at his lips. He liked the game. And Olivia knew exactly how to play, the chemistry that couldn't be ignored. The restaurant was candlelit, the kind of place where the wine list was longer than the menu, and the cheapest dish would still make someone's credit card cry. But Nate? He didn't even glance at the prices. He ordered a 1945 Chateau Mouton Rothschild without hesitation, one of the most expensive wines in the world. A single bottle worth more than Olivia's yearly salary at her marketing job. She watched, fascinated, as he spoke with the kind of confidence only wealth could buy. She wanted that confidence. She wanted the life that came with it. And Nathaniel Harrington was the golden ticket. "Tell me something," Nate said, swirling his wine lazily. "Why did you say yes to this dinner?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Why did you invite me?" His smirk widened. He liked a challenge. "I don't usually take women out to dinner." "Why? Too many options?" she teased, taking a sip of her wine. "Something like that." His gaze flickered across her face, studying, testing. "I don't like wasted time." "Neither do I." A beat of silence, tension humming in the space between them. And then he chuckled. "You're interesting, Olivia Carter." She smiled, but inside she knew she had just won round one. Love or luxury? The night stretched on, the conversation growing more effortless, the air thick with unspoken promises. Nathaniel was intriguing, but Olivia was calculating. She knew how these things worked. She had spent years studying women who had married into power, how they spoke, how they laughed at the right jokes, how they became indispensable. Because love wasn't enough, but power, stability, that was forever. And tonight, sitting across from one of the richest men in the country, she knew. She was going to make him fall for her, not by accident, not by fate, by design. The night ends, but the story begins. By the time they left the restaurant, Nate had already pulled out his phone. "Give me your number," he said, in that effortless, commanding way of his. Olivia didn't hesitate. She typed it in, her fingers steady, her heartbeat even steadier. He smirked as he saved it. "I'll call you." And she knew he would, because men like Nathaniel Harrington always kept their promises. The only question was, would he regret it? The perfect illusion. A love story everyone envied. For months, Olivia Carter lived in a dream, one stitched together with designer labels, exclusive galas, and whispered promises over candlelit dinners. Nathaniel Harrington wasn't just a boyfriend, he was a lifestyle upgrade. They became New York's golden couple, photographed at charity events, featured in luxury magazines. Olivia went from a girl in a one-bedroom apartment to a woman who drank morning coffee on the terrace of a penthouse overlooking Central Park. It was everything she had ever wanted, and yet, something felt off. It wasn't the way Nate treated her. No, he was perfect. Too perfect. The gifts, the adoration, the way he always seemed a little too sure that she'd never leave. Because the truth? He was right. Power is addictive. "Olivia, that dress is stunning on you," one of the socialites at the gala purred, swirling her champagne. She smiled, pretending to be modest. "Oh, this? Just something I picked up last minute." A lie. It was a custom Valentino, hand-delivered, paid for by Nathaniel without a second thought. She knew they envied her. She knew they wanted what she had. But none of them knew the truth. That she had been the one who planned it all. That she had played the long game and won. Every compliment, every admiring glance was proof that she had made it. But even with everything she had ever dreamed of, why did she feel like something was slipping through her fingers? The proposal that changed everything. Nathaniel took her to Paris in the fall. They dined under golden chandeliers, walked along the Seine as streetlights shimmered on the water. And then, on the balcony of a luxury suite with the entire city stretched out beneath them, he pulled out a 7-carat diamond ring. "Olivia Carter," he said, his voice steady, his gaze unshakable. "Marry me." The air left her lungs, not from shock, not from overwhelming love, but because this was the moment she had worked for. And yet, for the first time, she hesitated. Because for all the plans she had made, she never actually pictured this moment. But hesitation was weakness. And Olivia Carter was not weak. So she smiled, let tears glisten in her eyes just enough to look real, and whispered, "Yes." Nathaniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and the world clapped for them. But deep down, she wondered, was she marrying the man or the empire? When the power shifts. After the engagement, something changed. Not in Nate, in Olivia. She had always been the one chasing, the one making sure she was desirable enough to keep. But now he was the one proving himself. Now he was the one ensuring that she stayed. And with that shift, something inside her clicked. She didn't need him anymore. She had already won. And once you have power, what happens when you stop needing the person who gave it to you? Signs of a cracked foundation. The first time Nathaniel noticed, it was subtle. A missed call. A dinner rescheduled last minute. Nothing alarming, until one night when they were at an event and Olivia spent more time talking to a CEO twice her age than to him. "Liv," he said later that night, his voice carefully controlled. "You barely said 2 words to me all evening." She slipped off her heels, sighing. "I was networking, Nate. That's what we do at these events." "We?" His blue eyes darkened. "Funny. I thought you used to hate these things." "People change," she said lightly, walking past him. And that was when he knew. The girl who once worshipped him was starting to look at him like he was just another stepping stone. A love running out of time. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The wedding was being planned. The guest list was finalized. Olivia was on the verge of becoming a Harrington. But Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that she had already left him in her mind. One night, he found her standing on the penthouse balcony, staring out at the city. "Do you love me, Olivia?" She turned, her expression unreadable. "You're my fiancé, Nate." That's not an answer. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, she sighed, stepping closer. "Love isn't always the reason people stay together," she said softly. And just like that, he finally understood. She didn't love him. Maybe she never had. But she had loved what he could give her. And now that she had it, what was stopping her from walking away? A wedding that should have felt like a dream. The invitations were sent. The venue was booked. The world was ready to witness the marriage of the year. Olivia Carter, the stunning, ambitious woman who had risen from nothing, and Nathaniel Harrington, the man who had everything to give. To the world, they were perfect. Behind closed doors, they were anything but. Olivia had always imagined her wedding day, the grandeur, the opulence, the attention. She just never thought she'd feel so indifferent about the man she was marrying. But it didn't matter. Because the truth? This wasn't about love anymore. This was about power. And Olivia had never been closer to having it all. Nathaniel's desperation. Nathaniel wasn't blind. He felt the distance between them. The way Olivia didn't look at him the same way anymore. The way she seemed more interested in her career, her network, her future, without him at the center. One night, he confronted her. "Do you even want to marry me?" Olivia didn't flinch. She simply raised an eyebrow. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one." His voice was tense. "I feel like I'm losing you, Olivia." "You can't lose something you already own, Nate," she said smoothly, taking a sip of her wine. But that was the thing. He didn't own her anymore. A bride with second thoughts. 2 weeks before the wedding, Olivia stood in the bridal boutique, staring at herself in the mirror. The dress was perfect, a masterpiece of lace and silk, the kind of gown that women dreamed of wearing. But all she could think was, why don't I feel anything? Her best friend Claire watched her carefully. "Liv, are you happy?" Olivia hesitated, then in a voice almost too soft to hear, "I don't know." The temptation that changed everything. The week before the wedding, Olivia met him. Ethan Monroe, a self-made billionaire, ruthless, charming, and dangerous in all the right ways. They met at a private event, a business gala where Nathaniel had left her alone for the night. And Ethan noticed. "Olivia Carter," he said, swirling his drink, a smirk playing at his lips. "Or should I say, the future Mrs. Harrington?" She raised an eyebrow. "You sound amused." "I just don't picture you as someone who likes being kept in a glass case." Something about the way he said it sent a shiver down her spine, because for the first time in a long time, someone saw her. Not as Nathaniel's fiancée, not as the girl who had climbed her way to the top, but as Olivia. And that was dangerous. The betrayal. It started with a dance, a slow, intoxicating waltz at an event where no one was paying attention. Then, a whispered invitation, a penthouse suite, a door closing behind them. And finally, a mistake Olivia couldn't take back. The night Nathaniel found out. It was 2 days before the wedding when Nathaniel saw the pictures. A private investigator, a neatly packaged envelope, evidence of a betrayal that shattered everything. His fiancée in another man's arms. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel Harrington felt something he had never known before. Powerless. The calm. Before the storm. The morning of the wedding arrived with an eerie stillness. The Harrington estate was transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Ivory roses, golden chandeliers, 1,000 candles flickering beneath the grand arches of the family's private vineyard. It was the kind of wedding that magazines would cover for months. The kind of wedding Olivia had always wanted. And yet, as she stood in the bridal suite, staring at her reflection, she felt nothing. No excitement, no nerves, just an emptiness she couldn't explain. Claire adjusted Olivia's veil, her expression unreadable. "Are you sure about this?" "Of course," Olivia said automatically, but her voice lacked conviction. Because deep down, she knew. She wasn't walking into a marriage. She was walking into a negotiation. And Nathaniel? He knew it too. The moment everything shattered. The wedding was set for 4 p.m. sharp. At 3:45, Nathaniel was nowhere to be found. The whispers started almost immediately. Grooms don't go missing on their own wedding day. But Olivia already knew where he was, because she had received his text. "Meet me in the library. Now." Her heart pounded as she slipped out of the bridal suite, the heavy gown brushing against the marble floors. When she pushed open the library doors, Nathaniel was standing by the fireplace, his back to her, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn around. "Tell me, Olivia," he said, voice dangerously calm. "How long have you been sleeping with Ethan Monroe?" The blood drained from her face. Her breath hitched, but she didn't flinch. She had spent years perfecting the art of looking unshaken. So instead, she crossed her arms and said, "Who told you that?" Nathaniel finally turned to face her, and he wasn't smiling. "You didn't even deny it." Silence, the kind that felt like a gun being loaded. Olivia swallowed. "Nate, let's talk about this after—" "After?" He let out a sharp laugh. "You think this wedding is still happening?" Her stomach twisted. This wasn't going according to plan. She wasn't supposed to lose. But then, Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice dropping into something cold, something final. "You never loved me, did you?" Olivia held his gaze. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. A wedding with no bride. The guests were seated. The music had begun. But at 4:07 p.m., Nathaniel Harrington walked down the aisle, not to meet his bride, but to face the crowd alone. He stepped up to the altar, took a slow breath, and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he exhaled, "there will be no wedding today." The entire venue fell silent. Murmurs, gasps. Olivia, standing in the shadows, felt her entire world crumble. She had lost. And the worst part? Nathaniel had been the one to walk away first. The divorce before the marriage. The following week, Olivia found herself sitting in Nathaniel's office, except this time she wasn't his fiancée. She was the woman who had almost become a Harrington, but almost wasn't enough. Nathaniel tossed a set of documents onto the desk. "Sign it." She glanced at them. A settlement. A very generous one. But that wasn't what made her chest tighten. It was the fact that it came with one condition. She would never see him again. This was his way of saying, "You don't get to stay in my world." And for the first time in her life, Olivia realized what true loss felt like. The fall from grace. 3 months after the wedding that never was, Olivia Carter was no longer a headline. The magazines had moved on. The whispers had faded. And so had her life as she knew it. The penthouse? Gone. The designer clothes? Sold. The invitations to exclusive events? They had stopped coming the moment she lost the Harrington name. She had always thought of herself as untouchable. But now she was just a woman who almost had it all. And almost wasn't enough. Nathaniel's new beginning. Nathaniel, on the other hand, was flourishing. He had thrown himself into work, expanded his company, made strategic deals that only a man with nothing to lose would make. And of course, the media loved him even more now. The heartbroken billionaire who had been betrayed by love. Women lined up for a chance to fix him. But Nathaniel? He wasn't interested. Because no matter how much time passed, no matter how many new faces entered his world, Olivia still lived in the back of his mind. And that pissed him off more than anything. The unfinished business. One evening, as Nathaniel stepped out of his office, his assistant hesitated before speaking. "Sir, Olivia Carter is here to see you." He froze. Of all the names he never wanted to hear again, hers was at the top. He clenched his jaw. "Send her away." His assistant swallowed. "She said you'd want to hear what she has to say." A long silence stretched between them. Then, against his better judgment, Nathaniel exhaled sharply. "Send her in." A face he never thought he'd see again. When Olivia stepped into the room, she looked different. Not in the way she dressed. She still had the same elegance, the same beauty that had once captivated him. But her eyes, they weren't as sure as they used to be. For the first time, Olivia Carter looked like a woman who had lost. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You have 5 minutes." She swallowed, meeting his gaze. "I want to talk." Nathaniel scoffed. "Talk? You think we still have something to talk about?" "I think we have something to finish," she said quietly. Something flickered in his chest. Anger, resentment, something else. He shouldn't have let her in, but against every logical thought he did. And that mistake, it would change everything. A conversation that should have happened years ago. Nathaniel sat across from Olivia, his fingers tapping against the desk, his expression unreadable. "Talk," he said coldly. Olivia inhaled sharply. She had practiced this moment in her head 1,000 times, but nothing could prepare her for facing the one man who had once given her everything, only for her to throw it all away. "I never wanted to hurt you," she started. Nathaniel let out a bitter laugh. "You have a funny way of showing it." She deserved that. "I wasn't in love with Ethan Monroe," she admitted. His expression didn't change. "I don't care." "You should," she said softly, "because I did it for you." Nathaniel stiffened. His grip on control slipped, just for a second. "You expect me to believe that?" Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Nathaniel, you were never going to let me go first. You would have fought for me, even if I didn't deserve it, even if we were miserable." He stayed silent. "You think I didn't love you?" Olivia whispered. "But I did. Just not in the way you deserved." Nathaniel clenched his jaw. He hated that her words still affected him. "You could have just left." She let out a humorless laugh. "And walk away with nothing? You know me better than that." And that was the most honest thing she had ever said. She didn't regret leaving, but she did regret how she did it. Nathaniel's final decision. Nathaniel exhaled, leaning forward. "So why are you here now, Olivia? What do you want?" She hesitated. For the first time in her life, she didn't know. "I don't want money," she said finally. "I don't want pity. I just wanted to face you and say it." "Say what?" he asked, voice sharp. She swallowed. "I was wrong." The room felt smaller after those words. Nathaniel had imagined this moment so many times, hearing her admit it, hearing her say she made a mistake. And yet, it didn't bring him any satisfaction, because it didn't change anything. He had spent months hating her, wanting revenge, wanting her to feel what he felt. But now, looking at her, tired, lost, broken in her own way, he realized he didn't need closure. He had already moved on. Nathaniel stood up, and just like that, he walked away first. The ending no one expected. Olivia sat in silence long after Nathaniel left the room. She had come here expecting anger, a fight, maybe even a second chance, but she hadn't expected nothing. And somehow, nothing hurt the most. Because for the first time in her life, She was truly alone. She had spent years chasing a world that had never really belonged to her. And now, she had no idea where to go next. Nathaniel's new beginning. Nathaniel never looked back. He walked out of that office and into a life that no longer had Olivia Carter in it. And for the first time in a long time, he was free. Because love doesn't always end in flames. Sometimes it just fades away. The story is complete, but it leaves one question. Was Olivia ever truly in love? Or was it always about the power? And more importantly, did Nathaniel ever really stop loving her?